Hi YouTube, this is Ian from Big Rock Outdoors. So I've gotten a lot of comments saying that bikes like the 1200 GS or other large adventure bikes are poser bikes, and that these aren't true adventure bikes because they're too heavy, too complicated, and too difficult to fix out on the trail. Now I actually tend to agree with a lot of that. So here's the deal. When you see these big adventure bikes, they do have a place, they do make sense. So when you're talking about covering the freeways across the United States at 85 miles an hour for days on end, or maybe in Europe, or places like that where you've got these long motorway journeys where you're going to be 90% on the street and you're not really going through the sand dunes of Africa or Australia or crossing that kind of terrain and far away from dealerships and stores. So for that kind of more urbanized riding or sort of safe riding where you're never more than a couple hours away from a dealership or a town, the big adventure bikes make sense. Now, when you get into talking about taking a trip around the world or riding into Mexico or Central America, riding to South America, riding through Africa, riding across Australia, of course that's not going to be a good choice. So the word adventure bike has such a wide meaning that can be interpreted in many different ways. So the question is, for me, after I've had all these different bikes, what kind of bike would I choose if I was riding like around the world? So because most of that riding would be on like secondary highways, dirt and gravel roads, rough terrain, areas away from cities and dealerships, probably in foreign countries, crossing borders. I would want a bike that was simple, reliable, durable, that was easy to service while I was on the road, and that I could get parts anywhere in the world. I would not take a BMW. I would not take a Triumph Tiger. I would not take a big, heavy bike. I'd want something light that I could pick up by myself when I had my luggage on it. I'd want something without a lot of electronics and complication. So I've thought about this quite a bit, and I actually think that the bike that I would choose to take around the world would be a Suzuki DR650. So the reason I would choose a DR650 is a few things. It's relatively light, it's air-cooled, so you don't have radiators and hoses, you have one less thing to go wrong. It has long service intervals, so you can get away. It has enough oil capacity and enough valve inspection interval that you can ride for quite a few miles without worrying about maintenance. It's, like I said, it's light enough to pick up by yourself when you've got your luggage on it. It's capable of all different types of terrain. It'll cruise in relative comfort at 60, 65 miles an hour, which is probably faster than you need to go in most countries in the world, especially on unpaved roads or secondary highways. But it's also capable of going in off-road terrain. And it's going to be much less of a handful than something like a GS or even something like a Tenere 700, which just came out, or a KTM 790. Other things I like about the DR, it's got a pretty strong frame to it. You can load this thing up with some weight, you can put luggage racks on it, and you're not putting too much strain on the frame of the bike. It has a huge aftermarket. You can get whatever size tank you want. You can get windshields for it. You can mount a lot of accessories on it. It's just a good basic motorcycle. It's carbureted. Now, for me, that's kind of a mixed bag. I don't love carburation. I do like fuel injection, and I don't think fuel injection is necessarily unreliable. But I think if I was traveling in third world countries, not having a fuel pump to break and not having fuel injection to go wrong, or issues with the battery, or not being able to bump start it, roll start it, those things would come up for me, and I think I'd be more comfortable on a carbureted bike. So this is not meant to be a review of the DR650, but there are a lot of upgrades I think I would need to make if I was to set up a DR for going around the world. The DR does have some inherent weaknesses. It's got that neutral safety screw issue. There's a lot of things that need just sort of fixing up on the bike. If you covered all the basic issues with the bike, upgraded the suspension, put on better lighting, fixed whatever weaknesses it had, and then you could add your gas tank, your luggage, your navigation system. You could put on a comfortable seat. You could get the handlebars and the foot pegs sorted out to make it comfortable for you. And I think you'd be rewarded with a bike that could easily go around the world with probably not too many issues. A lot of you are going to say, well, why not a KLR 650? Well, there's a few reasons for it. The KLR 650 is about, maybe 40 or 50 pounds heavier than a DR, and it doesn't really have much advantage to that extra weight. It may have a slightly better headlight if we're talking about the Gen 2 KLR. It has a little more effective of a wind protection on the Gen 2 bikes. Instrumentation is a little bit better on the KLR. But the things that are the downside of the KLR, it tends to have more sort of built-in weaknesses. You've got things like the doohickey to worry about, the subframe bolts will break all the time. It just has more of a cheap construction that I don't quite trust as much. Now you could upgrade a lot of those things, yes, but you're still stuck with that extra weight that I don't know that you really need. Off-road, it's not as good as a DR. It's heavier and it doesn't have as good a suspension. On the highway, it cruises a little bit better, but a DR can be made just about as comfortable with a few modifications. I also wouldn't really want the liquid cooling of the KLR. The extra weight of the radiators, if you drop the bike in rocks and break the radiators or do something like that, you're going to be out of commission. Whereas a DR, you drop your bike 50 times, you just keep riding, no one cares. Why not the Honda XR650L? Well, I have a video comparing the KLR DR and the XR, which I recommend you go watch. But the XR has a few issues that I don't really love. It tends to run really hot, which you can read about on the internet, because it doesn't have an oil cooler. It's a really tall bike, so it's not as easy to reach the ground. Overall, it's just more of an off-road oriented bike. It has a better suspension than the DR650. If you're a really tall person who prioritizes going off-road a lot, then maybe you'll be happier with the XR versus the DR. Overall, I find the DR that perfect ground between the KLR and the XRL to be that kind of 50-50 bike. So I hope that answers the question of what bike would I choose to ride around the world. What about you? So why don't you put in the comments below, if you had any budget, what bike would you choose to ride to third world countries and take around the world? Let me know down below in the comments. That being said, I think I'm going to go check Craigslist and try to find a nice used DR650 for sale, because now I really want one after talking about it. I've had a DR before, but I didn't really give it enough chance, and I think I want another one, and I think it might fill that gap for me between the 1200 and the 500 that I have in the garage. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope this was informative. Please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. See you on the trail. Be safe. See you next time.